Kia ora, part two. So where were we? We were talking about this new newspaper or online Daily Mail headline. Um, Talking nonsense about Aleister Crowley. So we talked a little bit about what Aleister Crowley was. I guess we'll go on to talk a little bit more about what he wasn't. The other thing I just want to kind of challenge really from the article is this nonsense. I don't think it was in the headline, but I think it was in the beginning of the article describing him as a real-life Wicker Man. Now, this is a complete nonsense. Now, I am a huge fan of the film The Wicker Man. So for those of you that haven't seen the film The Wicker Man, when did it come out? Was it late 60s or early 70s? I'm not going to say too much about it because it's a really good film. Watch it. Don't worry too much. Don't bother with the sequel. The remake. The remake is okay with Nicolas Cage. Is okay as a film. I quite enjoyed it as a film, but The Wicker Man, it was not. So The Wicker Man. First of all, the thing about The Wicker Man is it's a musical, and it's got this fantastic soundtrack. So The Wicker Man, and this won't be a spoiler. The Wicker Man, because there's a picture of this on the cover of the DVD, and it's no secret really. The Wicker Man, we know about it. It's based on history, and it's based on what the Romans talked about. Something that they reported the Celts doing is burning criminals as sacrifices in a wicker man. A wicker man being a giant sculpture made of wicker, kind of a giant in the shape of a man or in the shape of a human being, made from wicker work. Okay, that could kind of contain, if you like, a kind of a holding area in the head, where you could put people that you wanted to burn alive, and that's what a Wicker Man is. So this headline that says Crowley, the real life Wicker Man, doesn't make sense because the Wicker Man is not a person. A Wicker Man is a three-dimensional kind of working of wicker. In which somebody is sacrificed. So what do they mean he's the real life Wicker Man? Maybe he was cremated. I don't know whether he was buried or cremated. If he was cremated, then I guess in a sense he's a real life Wicker Man, but then so is everybody that's cremated. Now where they may have also got confused, I don't know for sure, because it's a badly written article really, is with the word Wicca, W-I-C-C-A. So Wicca, while it's a whole subject in itself, we'll briefly demystify this a little bit. Okay, so Wicca. So we talked about in the previous video. Talked about that Crowley was not essentially a witch, but interestingly he did have a big influence on the formation of Wicca. So Wicca, W-I-C-C-A, is I think it's fair to say certainly you could call it a religion. I think for many people it is. It's quite close to a religion, in that it's got some of its own, it's got a belief system, it's got a degree of orthodoxy, it's got kind of some doctrine, if you like, as well as some frameworks for practice. And Wicca was created in the 50s essentially by a guy called Gerald Gardner, who was an occultist and was a Freemason and studied witchcraft and combined all of these things in a tradition all of its own, which he called Wicca. So most Wiccans are witches and practice witchcraft, but you can be a Wiccan without necessarily calling yourself a witch, and you can be a witch without necessarily calling yourself a Wiccan. But essentially, if I had to describe Wicca in a nutshell, I would say it's a religion with a strong emphasis on the practice of ritual and witchcraft. Okay, so whether this journalist used that term in the loosest sense of the word, in saying that Crowley was the real life Wicker Man, it was confusing the Wicker Man as in the film and as in the historic kind of thing from the writings of the Romans about the Celts, with Wicca, and saying that they think Crowley was a practitioner of Wicca, which is kind of close to the truth, because he did influence Wicca. So Crowley knew Gerald Gardner, who founded Wicca, and Wicca comprises lots of things. It comprises medieval sorcery, it comprises elements from ritual magic and from Freemasonry. Freemasonry is known as the craft, and sometimes Wicca is known as the craft. The equivalent of the word amen for so may it be, that's used in Wicca, is so mote it be, which is a Masonic term. So all these things do, cross-relate and cross-pollinate. But so maybe, Crowley wouldn't have described himself as a Wiccan and wouldn't have been a Wiccan, but he had a big influence on the creation of Wicca, which was created. People sometimes say that Wicca is the old religion kind of, returned, or a continuation of an old pre-Christian pagan religion, but it's not. It's very much a created thing. And Gerald Gardner, we know, made up a lot of stuff. Some things that we think, this is ancient, based on historical, ancient pre-Christian pagan practice, and it's not. Gerald Gardner was influenced by things like Eastern things as well, like things like Tantra, and also witchcraft traditions from all over the world. Because I was talking about witchcraft as being in a European context, but witchcraft is universal. Every culture has or had witchcraft. If you think about some of the African, traditions of, every tradition has got its, it's got its curses and its healing and its spells, So I just want to draw a line under that then, really, the real life Wicker Man. So it's a nonsense statement, but almost by accident, perhaps the journalist has hit on a partial truth. Okay, that's where these things get complicated. Do ask me questions. Really, to do this subject justice is, could take lots and lots of episodes. So, if Crowley wasn't a Satanist, okay, what is a Satanist? Okay, now this is really interesting. None of these things are simple, are they? They're all complicated and very nuanced. So I'm going to have to kind of simplify them even, this is an oversimplification, okay? And somebody that is a Satanist will probably, respond and say, you've missed this point and you haven't covered this. And I can't really, in the scope of a video that's this short. But Satanists in the modern era, broadly speaking, fall into two categories. So there are deistic Satanists and non-deistic Satanists. So deistic Satanists believe that Satan really exists and is a deity, which they either worship or work with in an occult way. And we're not talking about necessarily, this isn't one body of people with a clear doctrine. It's not like Catholicism or something. If you wanted to know about Catholicism, it's all very clear, it's all very definite, everything is very laid down in Catholicism. But in some of these other things, it's much looser. Okay, so you could find 10, 20, probably 50 people who identify as Satanists, and then if you ask them what they mean by that, they'd tell you all different things. Okay, and some would possibly belong to organisations and some wouldn't. Some would be kind of freestylers doing their own thing. But very broadly, so deistic Satanism, people believe there is such a thing as Satan, and they may worship Satan, or they may so with a lot of kind of occult and pagan traditions, it's not so much about worship, it's about doing magical work with a deity. So it's a different kind of relationship to the kind of traditional Christian kind of where you bow to a god or a deity. So somebody that describes themselves as a Satanist might be an occultist that works with with Satan or other demonic, satanic, classic deities, but in a ritualistic way, which doesn't necessarily mean worship or praise in a sense that we would kind of associate with Christianity. But probably the largest and certainly the most public form of Satanism, which was founded by a guy called Anton LaVey, and it's the Church of Satan. They don't believe in Satan, okay? So this is an interesting one, okay? The majority of Satanists do not believe in Satan, okay? So it's Satanism, non-deistic, or what they sometimes call LaVeyan Satanism, is, although it's a church and they have priests and they do weddings and all this kind of thing, I like to think of it more of as a philosophy, and it's a little bit like it's like one step. It's a kind of nihilistic philosophy, really. I think they would probably say a realistic philosophy. So it's a non-religious philosophy. Whereby, and it's a kind of a reaction to Christianity, and it's kind of a full and complete acceptance of what Christianity would describe as our vices and the things to avoid. It's a reversal in a way. So the symbol for, generally speaking, for Satanism is a pentagram, a 5-pointed star, but with the main point facing downwards. Okay. Now, the Wiccan symbol, and the symbol that's used in a lot of occult groups, using Freemasonry and other things, the pentagram with a point upwards. Okay. And among many other things, the pentagram, so the 5-pointed star, represents the 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water, and spirit being the 5th element. So in Wicca and in a lot of occult traditions, and in Christianity, because the pentagram is used as a Christian symbol as well, sometimes represents the 5 wounds of Christ. Okay, the point is upwards, which means spirit is at the top. So it's reversed in Satanism. Spirit is at the bottom. Okay, so it's about not aspiring to to what Christianity would see as the moral and higher values. It's about kind of recognizing, it's about accepting lust, anger, greed, and all those things as kind of human values, and kind of saying really that why should we aspire to these higher things? We are essentially animals. Why should we pretend to be something more than we are? And actually our true path to happiness and pleasure and fulfillment is embracing our animal nature, and not kind of seeing ourselves as some unworthy aspirant to something higher, but we're kind of okay. So for example, one of the what they say that in LaVeyan Satanism, one of the main feast days, if you like, is your birthday, because it's about kind of accepting who you are. Having said that, there are some morals in Satanism. So explicitly condemns harming children, for example. Okay, so Satanism for the most part is not devil worship. It's not even devil belief. It's not the pursuit of evil, really, but it's a kind of a philosophy that looks at human qualities in a different way, and kind of rails against some of the turn the other cheek kind of philosophy of Christianity, and turns it on its head, and turns the pentagram on its head, literally. So as far as I'm aware, I mean, LaVeyan Satanism came a long time after Crowley. And Crowley, I don't think Crowley was very egotistic. So if you were to define, even if you were to define Satanism as devil worship, I don't think Crowley was particularly into worshipping anyone apart from himself. Ironically though, I guess that if Crowley was around today, he might quite like, he would certainly have parallels with the deistic Satanism, with the LaVeyan Satanism, and phrases that he worked with, like "do as thou wilt," would be something that a modern day Satanist would be very happy with. So I guess, okay, if you're being really pedantic, you could describe Crowley as a proto-Satanist, but a proto-non-deistic Satanist. Okay, but having said that, he was a very spiritual man. He probably he did believe in demons and devils. So it all gets really complicated, doesn't it? How am I supposed to demystify this stuff? Okay, you expect me to demystify this in a short video, and I can't really. And I fear I may have failed in my objective here and complicated things even more than they were to start with. So, to sum up, Crowley was not a devil worshipper, and most Satanists are not devil worshippers. Crowley certainly wasn't a Wicker Man, apart from the fact that if he was cremated, then I guess he'd have that in common with a Wicker Man and been reduced to ashes. And he was an occultist, and some of his practices were quite dark, and some of his practices were quite highfalutin and focusing on the holy and the high. So, no, I suppose, what can we take out of this? Nothing is simple. Okay, nothing is simple. But I suppose let's rewrite that headline as my final thing. Okay, so rather than Satanist Aleister Crowley, say famous world famous occultist, Aleister Crowley. Really, there, world famous occultist. I suppose it's not such a sexy headline, is it? Really, there's no kind of clickbait in that. World famous occultist Aleister Crowley. I feel I have failed in my demystification mission. But I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are on my ramblings, and I will post them next to this article, this Daily Mail article. Good morning.